Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 184 of Chalk Talk. I am your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. I usually come on here and talk about Victory Monday with the Eagles. And I know that the game happened a long time ago, but it's like 4 or 5 days. I'm still buzzing about Notre Dame. I've got 3 days left. All I can think about is Notre Dame. So I won't even really think about the Wildcard game until Thursday at midnight, around then. That's really when I'll start loading up and locking in for Green Bay, Philadelphia, which we'll get to that and why it annoys me. But I am full on Orange Bowl is the only thing on my mind.
All right. Well, it is a very significant day around the NFL. It is Black Monday. And, I had a lot of discussions with the producers of the podcast, and we've decided this thing is moving in the right direction. So we're going to retain Mark as co-host through the 2025 season. So I just wanted to let everybody know that. I know Mark was on the hot seat there for a while, but Mark, public statement. You got anything to say about that?
Yeah, it's, ownership leaving me on a 1-year contract was really tough. Really felt like we got the most out of what we could this year. Felt like the program is in a good spot moving forward. And I actually lied a little bit ago, so maybe that goes against my point here. I said the only thing on my mind is Orange Bowl. But I will say, Shane knows how obsessed I am with Black Monday and guys getting fired, guys getting kept, who's getting interviewed, trying to connect the dots. Maybe next week. I don't know if I feel like every year it's kind of different on when coaches get hired a little bit, but sometimes it's faster. Sometimes it takes a little longer depending on if the coordinators are in Super Bowl runs. I don't think anyone will be hired by next Monday. I feel like there won't be any decisions made that fast with the 5 open jobs. So next Monday, I'll try to make the connections. Once we have a little bit more of who's interviewing where, I'll try to make my predictions about who's going to get hired where.
Yeah. Mark does love Black Monday. So we're going to touch on that. And then we're going to get into previewing wildcard matchups. And you guys are used to hearing us recap stuff. And we will be back to that next week. Throughout the playoffs, we will recap and preview all in one show because there's less games. But let's start with the guys that are safe. The Giants announced they are retaining both Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll. And then Mike McDaniel is safe for another year in Miami. Brian Callahan is safe for another year in Tennessee. And Shane Steichen is safe in Indianapolis. So Mark, of those 4 guys that were potentially on the hot seat and are safe, what are your thoughts about those guys before we move on to the firings?
Steichen, I 100% think that's a Chris Ballard problem. I don't think we've seen any update on Chris Ballard yet. I don't think anyone's been able to pick the amount of quarterbacks and hire the amount of head coaches that Chris Ballard has with like absolutely nothing behind it. So I think Steichen's a really good play caller. I think him going 9-8 last year with Minshew and competing to make the playoffs was really impressive. Even this year, they went 8-9. I think they went 8-9, maybe 9-8, something in that range. I think firing Steichen would have been a massive, massive mistake. McDaniel's a weird one. Like, I don't think I would fire McDaniel, but I would say that I've been extremely disappointed in his ability to handle the games that Tua misses. Guys like McDaniel, the Shanahan, McVay tree, whatever you want to say, that young offensive mind. You look at Kevin O'Connell and how many quarterbacks he's been able to kind of fit into his system and get pretty good production out of. It feels like anytime Tua is out, Miami's a train wreck. And that's on McDaniel. Does he deserve to be fired for that? Probably not. I think it's probably more of a personnel issue, probably more of just a Tua limitation issue and Tua not being available issue. But I don't think I'd fire McDaniel. Daboll, who's the other? I mentioned Steichen, McDaniel. I want to leave
Brian Callahan and Brian Daboll.
Callahan, it's hard to even. I kind of feel the same way about Mayo, about Callahan. Like, they fired him. I get it, but like I don't really know what he was supposed to do. But if they would kept Mayo, I kind of just said the same thing, firing him.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. Losing Mark on Black Monday right after we announced that guys are getting cut. We cut Mark out of the podcast, but I'll keep going here, and hopefully Mark will jump back in with us. Oh, there's Mark. Mark's back. We were cutting out a little bit there, but we got Mark back. So let's get into the guys that were fired then.
Real quick, because I didn't want to. I think Daboll's the most interesting one, the Giants one. Callahan, whatever. The Giants, I was openly saying Daboll, I was hoping he'd get fired because I do think he's a good coach. And I think what he showed with Daniel Jones last year is enough proof of that. Keeping Joe Shane, in my opinion, there's no defense for it. Yeah. And I don't think that Brian Daboll has any ability to bounce back now that it's Joe Shane making the decisions again for next year.
Yeah, agreed. I think they should have gotten rid of Joe Shane and kept Brian Daboll. So the Patriots fired Gerard Mayo after one season. The Jags fired Doug Peterson, but they retained the real problem in Trent Baalke. And then the Bengals fired, this isn't a head coach, but he was considered a hot head coaching name a few short years ago, and defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. So let's start with Mayo. I said they never should have hired Mayo, but I also don't know what they expected in 1 year. Like they clearly just hired Mayo to fire him after a year. Like it wasn't good, but look at the roster. I don't know what they expected. This was just kind of a disaster from the get-go. So I think they land in the right spot of looking for a coach that's not Gerard Mayo, but they should have been doing that last offseason.
Yeah, I agree. Like I wouldn't have, we've kind of said this each of the last couple of weeks. I wouldn't have hired Mayo, but what have I seen that I think he's incompetent and think that I feel like the season went pretty well for like what you'd want if you're New England coming into the year. Like I think you feel better about Drake May leaving it than you did coming into it. And with no weapons, and you're walking away with a pretty high pick. Like could have been higher if you didn't mess things up in week 18. And maybe that, I don't think that played a part in him getting fired. I think he was probably going to get fired either way. And if anything, that was a little bit of an FU on the way out the door. But it's like Callahan. Like you kept him. Yeah, sure. I get it. Like, why would you fire him? You didn't really give him a chance. Mayo, you fired him. Yeah, I get it. I mean, it wasn't an impressive season, but like, did he really have a chance? There's also the argument, like, did they hire him knowing that this was going to be a really uphill climb after Bill left? And let's not hire a guy like Vrabel, who we actually, this is what the comment I think is saying here. Let's not hire a guy like Vrabel, who we hope is the guy for the next 10 years and get the stink of whatever's going to happen in these 1 to 2 years on him. That's pretty negative if that's true. I'm not going to think that that's 100% the case. I don't think Kraft would do that without at least hoping that, maybe he's got some upside as a head coach. But yeah, it's hard to not think that.
Yeah. And then the Jags fire Doug Peterson, which Doug Peterson's been bad, and there needs to be a change there. But retaining Trent Baalke after you fire Doug Peterson, I just don't get that. And they basically said that in the statement, they basically said that the new head coach will report to the owner, not the GM, and that never ends well either. Like they're already setting up the divide, the power struggle between the coach and the GM. If Trent Baalke just needs to be gone, and the Jags are a very unappealing job if I'm a head coach candidate until Baalke is gone.
I will give Baalke credit. I think he probably hit a home run this year on Brian Thomas Jr. Like I think that's probably an excellent pick. But yeah,
it is, but pigeonholing yourself into everyone in the world knowing you have to take a wide receiver.
That's fair.
It is bad GMing. And so Brian Thomas turned out to be a good player, but if Brian Thomas was a bad player, they still would have picked him. Like they absolutely had to.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's definitely a fair way to look at it. There was a little debate out there about who was wide receiver 4, so they could have picked another guy. But yeah, I agree with you. The process wasn't great. The results worked out. But it's kind of like the Raiders picking Bowers a year after taking a tight end really high. It's like, yeah, you couldn't have it couldn't have went better, but the process kind of sucked getting there. But yeah, I mean, Baalke, you look at the Trayvon Walker decision, look at hiring Urban Meyer, look at anything that's happened in these last couple of years with not fixing anything. You collapsed last season, and you hope that, you look at the Eagles. The Eagles collapsed last season, brought back a ton of the same personnel, a ton of the same coaching staff. And here they are, and they turned things around. The Jags collapsed last season, and I thought that they were going to win the division. Like, I thought that this was a good enough team that they could handle turning around. And obviously they're in a much worse spot than they were last year. So yeah, I don't think it makes any sense to keep Balky.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. Bengals fired defensive coordinator Lou Anarumo. He was considered a hot head coaching name a few years ago. And there's no doubt the Bengals defense has been terrible this season. It also just feels like they've been, he's been cut off at the legs so many times. Like, it's like every time they develop a player, the player walks because the Bengals don't trade him. And they have drafted some guys that just didn't pan out with early picks. But you probably have to make a switch there. I still think Lou Anarumo is probably a really good defensive coordinator, though.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. I mean, we talk about it all the time. Defensive regression year to year comes for everybody. Like, it's so hard to repeat defensive performance year to year. And that's for a lot of reasons. It's because of injuries. It's because of depth. It's because of schedule disparity year to year. There's so many reasons. It's because of when you catch certain teams and you maybe get a backup quarterback in week 7 instead of a starter, or whatever the case may be. And you look at year to year and you see all the time. I think that the stat is, I believe only about 30% of top 10 defenses are able to repeat that the next season. So you think about that, that means 7 of the top 10 defenses are going to fall into the bottom 22 of the NFL every year. And I think there's also a stat, like, out of the bottom 10 defenses, I think 20% will end up in the top half of the league. So it's just year to year, offense is a lot more reliable, which is, in my opinion, and just another of many reasons that when you're looking to hire a head coach, you should be hiring an offensive play caller.
Yeah, I was going to look up here Cincinnati. So Cincinnati ranks 29th in defensive DVOA this season. But last year they were 23rd. What were they in 2022? 2022, they were 7th.
And I think 2021 was a Super Bowl year, so they were probably up around there as well. And if they weren't, they played like it in the playoffs.
They were 16th in 2021.
They were a lot better in the playoffs, yeah.
And then, so, they were an average defense in 2021 that played well in the playoffs. They were a top 10 defense in 2022, and then 23rd, so slightly below average last year, and then just bad this year. And some of that comes down to drafting, player development, personnel decisions, but Lou Anarumo gets the axe, and I would imagine he will land pretty quickly somewhere as a DC.
Yeah, I think he'll probably land somewhere. I guess the Doug question, you mentioned Doug earlier. Is he done? Do you think he tries to be an OC? Does he ever get back in head coach kind of the debates or interviews? Does he just go do TV? I don't know what he does. He kind of took the year off last time he got fired. I wonder what the future is for him.
Yeah, we have a YouTube comment here from Yako that asked if he should be like a bridge head coach to fix team culture. And that'd be kind of funny. Like, you do the bridge quarterback thing. What if we hey, we've got this QB coach that we think's an up-and-comer, so we're going to make him OC so you can't bring Press Taylor into the building. And Doug, you come be our bridge head coach for 2 years. I feel like Doug's probably done. I feel like Doug was burned out and took the year off the last time around. I think after Jacksonville, he probably just rides off into the sunset. I don't think he's I don't know. I think Doug loves being in the locker room and around the game. I don't know if he loves the game enough to continue to grind as a guy that's done being a head coach as like an OC somewhere. I don't know. If I'm Doug, I probably just am going to ride off into the sunset. Go do a media job if you want to still be around the game, or just go enjoy retirement. Doug's I don't know. There's this picture that I always have of Doug Peterson as like a grandpa figure from all the press conference stuff and all of the locker room interactions we saw when he was with Philly. And I don't want my grandpa going through this again. I just want him to go retire and enjoy his life.
I could see him going to the Chiefs rehab facility and be in the OC in Kansas City, but Yeah, especially since, by the way, Matt Nagy is getting mentioned for every job that's available, which is hilarious.
I mean, I guess he did coordinate Mitch Trubisky's best year, but
that's incredible. By the way, this is just a breaking news from just a second ago. Ben Johnson will interview for the Patriots and Bears head coaching jobs during this week's bye, a sign he has real interest in both jobs.
All right. And the Jets are not expected to interview Ben Johnson because they don't want to be good at football.
And I saw something that he doesn't want to interview with the Saints.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. Nobody should want to interview with the Saints. The Jets are interested in defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn from Detroit. The Bears are expected to interview Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. The two teams left to watch are the Raiders with Antonio Pierce and then the Cowboys with Mike McCarthy, whose contract is technically expired. So those are the two teams we expect to maybe fire somebody that haven't made an announcement yet. What's your gut feeling on the Pierce with the Raiders and McCarthy with the Cowboys?
I would be floored and shocked if Mike McCarthy was fired at this point. The way Jerry talks, and I really think he just loves a guy that's going to do whatever he says. So I think McCarthy's there. Pierce is the one that goes back and forth. Right now, I kind of feel like he gets fired. I don't know why I feel that way. I think a couple days ago, I was saying I'd be surprised if they wanted to pay another coach. I think they've got to fire him. You've got to move on. This year was so irrelevant. They might have been like the most irrelevant team in sports this year. So outside of Bauer setting a record there, but yeah, I think you've got to move on.
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I think Pierce goes. I think McCarthy stays. So, Mark, of the 5 open jobs right now, we're gonna rank these. You've got Saints, Jaguars, Jets, Patriots, Bills. What's the top? You're a head coach candidate. What's the number one job you want?
You said Bills there. I have 4 of them. Patriots,
Sorry,
Bears.
I said Bills. I didn't. Saints, Jags, Jets, Patriots, Bears, not Bills. Jets. I would want the Bills if that job came open. That's for dang sure.
I think the bottom 2 by far are Jets and Saints. I think I would put the Jets slightly above the Saints. I think they have a little more young talent, depending where you're at on Sauce Gardner at this point. Garrett Wilson, Breece Hall, Olu Fashanu, a couple guys that you could build around at least at a young age still on their first contract. The Saints, what do you have? You have Alvin Kamara, who's old. You have Chris Olave, who's got massive concussion issues.
The Saints are committed to being bad for 2 years to get out from under the cap. You don't want to be the face of that.
It's by far the worst job. And by the way, they're interviewing David Shaw, who used to coach Stanford in the Andrew Luck era. He hasn't coached in years. It's been 3 to 4 years since the guy coached. He's interviewing for a Saints head coaching job. It's insane. But
yeah, I legitimately wouldn't even I'd go take the interview because interview practice is good, but I wouldn't remotely consider going to the Saints unless they gave me a 10-year contract, because you're getting fired in 2 years and it's going to put a stink on you for a couple of years after that. So if you're going to pay me for 10 years of being a head coach, I'll come ruin my career in New Orleans, but otherwise I'm out.
Yeah, if you give me a 5-year contract, I'd probably just say yes to any job if I wasn't getting the other ones, because I think getting fired as a head coach is the best job in sports. You get so much money to do nothing, and then you can still take assistant jobs. But yeah, you're right from a reputation standpoint. You probably will ruin your reputation by taking this job, but you get a lot of money. That's kind of the trade-off. And Ben Johnson's really the first person that I can really remember. There's a couple. I think Josh McDaniels had a couple times where he turned down a job or two here or there. But Ben Johnson's the first guy I can remember being this meticulous about turning down the amount of jobs he has. And you could argue maybe he should have taken the Washington job last year. Are these jobs better than the Washington job was? I think probably not. I don't know if that's fair. Looking at maybe what Washington's done, maybe is skewing that. But I would say Jets and Saints are 4-5. I would argue that the Raiders would slot right above them if Pierce gets fired and would kind of be in that bottom 3 also. Mark Davis does not have a lot of money. I don't think you're going to go out and spend a ton on the free agency market. And then I think there's a clear top 3, and it probably at this point depends on how you feel about the quarterbacks. With the Patriots and Drake May, with the Bears and Caleb Williams, and with the Jags and Trevor Lawrence. I think the Jags are 3 with Trevor.
Same.
With Trevor being paid the amount he is, not having a second-year rookie contract guy.
And Balky still being in the building.
Yes.
They probably go up. If they fired Balky, they'd be higher.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's not a job you don't take, though.
Right.
Like, I think you still, if you're a good coach and you're out there, you can watch the 2022 close of 2022, start of 2023 tape on Trevor Lawrence and be like, okay, I'm sold. Like, I can work with this and I can get there. So I think you still take the job if you don't get one of the top 2 jobs. I would go. This is where it gets tough. The top 2 is where it gets tough. I would go Bears second.
Agreed. So here's why. I love Drake May, and I would have to go back and watch NFL film on these guys for the rookie season, because I might be creeping May closer to Caleb and maybe past him. However, there's just some infrastructure in Chicago. Like, you've got some receivers. The offensive line's not great, but you have one. Like, it's a defense that can play at a decent level. And I think that also there's just the shenanigans with the Patriots hiring and then firing Mayo, and that puts a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I don't know what you want out of me as a year 1 head coach when our preseason over-under was 3.5 wins and we won 4 and I got fired. Like, so I would have concerns about that. It's a division, not that the Bears division is going to be easy to win. But the Patriots have to go up against the Bills. And it just seems like with Josh Allen, the Bills are going to dominate that division. Whereas the NFC North doesn't have that dominant quarterback to go against either. So, I mean, the AFC East, it's going to be easier to make a wild card than the NFC North. But I do think you have a little more wiggle room in terms of you don't have an elite quarterback in the division. You do have more infrastructure. And this is a team that stuck with Matt Eberflus like 2 years too long. And so they've showed some loyalty to head coaches that the Patriots maybe haven't. So I would go Bears 1, Patriots 2. But I think you take either job because you feel like you've got a QB of the future.
The one thing the Bears keeping everyone around from that last, like, Poles, who's been there for years, and Kevin Warren, who's been there for years. And the only thing that the Patriots feels like a slightly more, and I agree, I think the Bears have a better roster and more things to build on. The Patriots feel like a bit more of a blank slate almost. They've had that GM only for like 9 months. I go back and forth. And by the way, what you said, I don't think is crazy. Like, saying you'd rather have Drake May than Caleb Williams. I think you could make the case for either. Even though I think if you look at Caleb's numbers and some of his tape, it's not nearly as bad as some people would have you believe. But May, I think, is a special. We've both loved May for a long time. I think it depends on what you want. Like, I think if you want you want to build a team in your image, and you want to kind of start from scratch and kind of develop a young roster, I think it's the Patriots. If you think you can come in year 1 and turn a team into like a 9, 10, 11 win team right away, then I think it's probably Chicago.
And New England does have $50 million more in cap space heading into next year than the Bears. But that's not to say the Bears don't have a lot. The Bears have $81 million in cap space. They're 6th in the NFL. The Patriots just have 131. They've got tons of cap space opened up.
Yeah. I was reading, it's kind of like, you remember that one offseason where Belichick went nuts signing people? He signed like Hunter Henry to a ton of money. And like,
that was the Jonnu Smith. Didn't they sign Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith in the same offseason?
Juju, I think, as well. And there was a couple, they just like went out and spent money in the weirdest way possible. I think they're like finally out from under that. I was reading like when they have 131 million and people were talking about how it makes it such an attractive job, which I think it does. And they were like basically outlining it's because of the fact that offseason can no longer hurt them. It's pretty funny.
Here it was 2021. They spent $163 million in free agency. I'm trying to find a list of some of the deals, but
was Cam was probably involved. That was the Cam.
They paid 2 of the top tight ends, Jonnu Smith, 4 years, $50 million, Hunter Henry, 3 years, $37 million in that same offseason.
Juju got like I think it was like a 1-year deal, but I think it was a good amount of money. They signed
Nelson Aguilar.
Yes.
2 years, $22 million. They signed Kendrick Bourne, which turned out to be a great deal. 3 years, $15 million.
Yeah, that was a good deal.
Yeah. Matthew Judon, 4 years, $54 million. Ted Karras, 1 year, $3 million. Jalen Mills, 4 years, $24 million. Kyle Van Noy, 2 years, $12 million.
Yeah, they went out and spent so much money, and then I think even the next year they went out and spent some weird money as well. But yeah, that's what Mayo thought he was getting a chance at. Absolutely, you got to feel bad for Gerard Mayo. No way around that.
Yeah, it would be hard to trust Kraft, but so there you have it. There's some thoughts we have on Black Monday. I'm sure we will be touching on this next week as more rumors fly around as well. But Mark, let's pivot over to.
By the way, just one last comment from Anthony here. He commented earlier, Doug should be a college head coach. He could eat ice cream with the guys and they would appreciate it more. I kind of love that. Kind of love Doug as like the NC State head coach. Like, I don't know. I kind of think that's a good idea. I like that.
NC State rivals with Bill Belichick. They can relive the Super Bowl every year when they play on rivalry week. It'd be great. Okay, let's get into Wildcard weekend matchups, Mark. We'll start. We'll just go in order here. Let's start Saturday. The 4:30 game is the number 5 seed Chargers at the number 4 seed Texans. So the Texans are 4th in sacks this year. They've got Danielle Hunter and Will Anderson, both with double-digit sacks off of the edge. But offensively, they've been very inconsistent this season. They are 24th in EPA per play since week 10. And some of it is due to maybe some regression from CJ Stroud. Some of it is due to how banged up they are at the skill positions. And some of it's just due to a porous offensive line. But it's really difficult to trust the Texans in any sort of a playoff setting, given how this offense has performed. And we've said all along that, the Texans were the easiest, first round out in the playoffs. You could go ahead and write it down, whoever got the 5 seed. Well, now it's the Chargers. And the last time we saw the Chargers on a playoff field, they blew a 27-0 lead to the Jags that somehow didn't even get Brandon Staley fired. So what are your thoughts going into this game? Who do you expect to see come out of Chargers-Texans?
So everybody knows I'm a big gambling guy, and I feel like, especially like, I love betting Wild Card weekend. I feel like I've had some big hits the last couple of years. I loved Green Bay last season. They obviously won outright as a pretty big dog. I remember I loved the Rams to cover against Detroit, and they did. This year, I'm looking at this slate, and I do not love it from a gambling standpoint. This is the only game that I locked in a bet last night on, and it's Chargers -2.5. That's creeping up to 3.5. I'd say if you like the Chargers, go no free ads, but there's a blue gambling app. I would say go use that and say it's -2.5 right now, 3.5 elsewhere. Go bet it and lock it in now, because I don't think that that's going to be below a field goal when it gets to, I guess, Saturday. The Texans, there's a fun stat. Bill Simmons listeners out there know about the Shakey's Bowl. Bill Simmons had a longtime fantasy football league that got together at a year-end party at a crappy pizza place in LA called Shakey's, and they would always do it during the first game of Wild Card weekend, and it became the Matt Schaub Bowl. Because if you look at Texans Wild Card playoff games, the last 8 times the only 8 times that the Texans have made the playoffs, their game in Wild Card weekend has happened Saturday at 4:30.
That's crazy.
Every single time. It's just the Texans spot. And that's where they put the worst game. And they hide the Texans where no one will watch them, or less people will watch them. So fun little comment from Cameron Crawford there. A lot of people have been talking about that. But I just think this Texans team is so fraudulent. A shocking, and I hate this, but a shocking comparison tweet was going around about Caleb Williams and CJ Stroud, and they had their big moment in week 2 where the Texans beat the Bears, and CJ Stroud kind of Lil Broed Caleb Williams, and tried to kind of be like, can't take those hits, man, and kind of talking down to him a little bit. And there was people went after Caleb about not taking that in stride. Well, Caleb had a much better year the rest of the way than CJ Stroud did statistically. And he had a better year on the whole than CJ Stroud did statistically. I can't remember someone having such an incredible rookie season and regressing the way that CJ has. I'm on the Chargers pretty big here, and it's because of the offense. When Joe Mixon gets going, the offense looks pretty good. More often than not, Joe Mixon doesn't get going. I guess what I'll ask you is, I'm assuming you're kind of on the same wavelength. You're obviously the big Herbert guy over there. Kind of pains me to be betting on Justin Herbert in a big playoff game, but that's where we're at. I guess I'll turn it to you and say, how concerned are you about Stroud long term, as kind of he was supposed to be one of these top 10 guys going forward? Do you still look at him that way and look at this as maybe a blip, or blame the O-line or the coaching? Or do you look at this and say, and yeah, someone commented Dylan Diggs going down has hurt him a lot. Maybe it's the injuries as well. Or do you look at it and say, this is real regression, he doesn't look like the same guy, and you're concerned going forward?
I mean, I think he's regressed this year. I think injuries play a part in that. I think the sophomore slump can play a part in that. You kind of take we've seen this before. You take the league by storm in year one, and then you take the big leap. I mean, we can talk about it with the Eagles even. It wasn't Jalen Hurts' rookie season, but his second season when they make the Super Bowl run, and then it was a step back offensively last year. And NFL defenses are good at adjusting, and I think CJ Stroud's a guy you still want as the face of your franchise. I try not to. I'm almost getting to the point that not only do I not want to rank quarterbacks after their rookie season when I do quarterback rankings, I don't want to rank them until I've seen them in the league for 3 years, which is a really lame way to produce football content. But it's like, so you see guys come in and they're terrible. Look at Bryce Young. And even what he did the first part of his second year, and then he was really good down the stretch. And it just seems like we're so quick to like stamp the careers for these guys coming into the league, or after a rookie season, or after a second season. And the reality is it takes time. So, when I will do my quarterback rankings again this offseason, and CJ Stroud will drop from where I had him, but it doesn't mean I'm out on him. You just have to react to what you've seen so far. I still believe in CJ Stroud. I still believe in DeMeco Ryans. I think it's probably a conglomeration of his rookie season was so good. Like, we probably should have anticipated coming back to earth a little bit.
Bobby Slowick's an interesting, he's already gotten named as an interview for two jobs. It was the Jets and someone else. I don't know who the other team was. But the Texans fans want him fired. Like they think he's terrible. He was a name I really liked after last season. It's going to be interesting to see next year kind of what happens with Houston. Cameron said, do you think it's teams getting more film on a guy? I think that's maybe fair. And I think that it's something that I wanted to bring up because you don't see that happen with Lamar. You don't see that happen with Josh. I know that Jalen had the regression last year. His regression was really like a 6 to 7 game thing. He was like the MVP favorite in week 11 or 12, whatever it was.
So, it was also just coupled with a offensive coordinator, whose response to a cover zero blitz was to run verticals every time.
Yeah. I think you see these guys with elite athleticism and traits like Jalen, like Josh, like Lamar. We'll see on Jaden Daniels. I think it's harder to say, oh, well, the film figured out guys like that, because the natural athleticism and the improvisation is so hard to solve. Whereas CJ Stroud, I think you can probably solve some of the things he did really well. If you look at some concepts, I know people were saying they were really good at mesh concepts last year, and teams have kind of caught up to that for them. So I don't watch Houston tape enough to tell you exactly what's happening, but I would say a guy like CJ Stroud is probably more easy to adjust to in a second year, as opposed to guys with elite athleticism who are going to give you what you need outside of the pocket to kind of supplement that.
Yeah, which is also why I just love having mobile quarterbacks so much, because it's just an extra thing a defense has to worry about. And we're going to talk. I'm actually going to specifically talk about that issue for a certain defense later in this show. So let's keep rolling here. Let's go to the Saturday night game. Steelers, the 6th seed, at the Ravens, who are the 3 seed. They split in the regular season. The Steelers won 18-16 in week 11. The Ravens won 34-17 in week 16. I believe those were both on their home fields. These are two teams going in opposite directions. The Ravens outscored opponents 135-43 in the final 4 games of the year. Their defense is on a heater. They've only allowed 15.4 points per game the last 7 weeks. And the Ravens defense, we talked about in the mid part of the season, they're just not good enough to win a Super Bowl. They were 29th in drop back EPA the first 10 weeks of the season, but they're first weeks 11 through 18. So the Ravens defense has come alive. Meanwhile, the wheels have really come off the Russ train. And I looked dumb back when they made the switch to Russell Wilson from Justin Fields and saying I thought that was a mistake. If you stick around long enough, we can go with never wrong just early when it comes to analyzing takes, because you go back to the pass game doesn't work. And the pass game also didn't work great with Justin Fields. But by the way, like, the run game was better. And if you look at their EPA, Russell Wilson's EPA compared to Justin Fields has like 3 times the EPA per play of Russell Wilson. So now you get into like Steelers fans were chanting for Fields at week 18, and that's not something you like going into the playoffs. So what do you make of the whole Steelers thing? I mean, we know the Steelers are just destined to have a winning record and lose wild card weekend, and I think that's what this is shaping up for again.
Yeah, I mean, do you know the line on this game, Shane?
I don't. I didn't look at the lines. I figured you'd have me covered there.
Then actually, that creates an interesting thing. Maybe I'll have you guess them a little bit here. What do you think the line is here? Pittsburgh at Baltimore.
It's high. I would guess it's high. I would say Ravens minus 7.5.
9.5. It opened 8.5. It's up to 9.5 now. And yeah, I 100% believe that Justin Fields should be the starting quarterback. And there were so many points of that game where the offense was so stagnant against a really bad defense in Cincinnati. I can't believe Fields didn't get a crack in that game. It's been so weird that they've chosen to go about their season this way. I actually shared a screen here, Shane. If you want to share it, it goes off of something that you mentioned. This is from a couple of weeks ago now, so it's a little outdated. But Ben Solak had a tweet, and let me drop that down a little bit. The Ravens EPA from weeks 1 to 9, like Shane said, 28th per dropback. It is first since week 10. And the biggest reason for that, if you look at Kyle Hamilton's snaps and how he was breaking down, he was playing 20 plus snaps a game at inside and outside linebacker when he's the best free safety in the NFL. It made absolutely no sense. And you look at the direct correlation between playing him less at linebacker and putting almost all of his snaps at safety. And there you are. That's exactly what happens right there. And someone on Twitter, when I was tweeting about that, was like, well, he was really good at linebacker too. And it's like, yeah, he's Kyle Hamilton. He's really good. I'm sure he's
really good at everything.
Yeah. But what you're taking away is having that center fielder who can make so many impacts in the run game and even more primarily in the pass game. And I know Mina Kimes was saying that he belongs on the top 5 of Defensive Player of the Year voting. He should be in that conversation just for the impact he's had in the second half of the year primarily. So Kyle Hamilton is the biggest reason that I'm confident in the Ravens, not only in this game, but I'm confident in this defense to hold up in a way that it did not hold up for the first half of the year. I think what we've seen in the second half of the year, also first time DC in, I think his name's Zach Orr, something like that. And I think he figured some stuff out, obviously, like put Kyle Hamilton at his correct position. So I think what we've seen these last 2 months is more indicative of the first 2 months. Also, another thing I wanted to point out with Baltimore, Aaron Schatz from football, not from Football Outsiders anymore. I forget where he's at now.
FTN Fantasy.
There you go. He does the DVOA rankings, obviously. Baltimore, all time, ranks as the 7th best team in the history of the NFL this year from DVOA. Now, he would say, I understand why people are skeptical of that, because last year's Baltimore team was the 5th best team of all time, and the 2019 Baltimore team was the 11th best team of all time. Mm-hmm. And I think that there's a chance Lamar has broken DVOA a little bit here. But people are using that and kind of going at him and saying, well, how could the stat be relevant, or how could this stat work if 3 Baltimore teams are in the top 11 of all time? The Baltimore Ravens this season have played 10 playoff teams. I don't know if I've ever seen that before in my life. And that's not even mentioning they also played the Bengals twice, and they played the Cowboys with Dak. But they played the Chiefs, the Bills, the Steelers twice, the Eagles, the Commanders, the Bucks, the Broncos, the Chargers, the Texans. They've played one of the hardest schedules I've ever seen. Even if you want to say, oh, well, some of those teams aren't good. How many teams are legitimately good? Like 5 or 6, Lions, Vikings, Eagles, and then the top 3 in the AFC. They've played 3 of them. They played the Chiefs, they played the Bills, they played the Eagles. They went 2-1 in those games, or 1-2 in those games with a game against the Chiefs that they easily could have won. So I think this Ravens team is really, really good. I think they're a top 3 team in the NFL. And I think they're going to go on the road and beat Buffalo next week after they win this game.
Yeah, and that does bring the last stat I'll throw out for this game. And it's that Lamar has a 2-4 postseason record. And in those 6 games, he's turned the ball over 9 times. And so if you're a Steelers fan, you're just banking on, maybe we get one of those Lamar games. And in the 4 losses in the playoffs that they've had, the Ravens have only averaged 10.5 points a game. And so I don't think you have much of a shot in this game. But if you do it, you're probably counting on another Lamar letdown in the postseason.
I don't even want to go there, Shane. I'm not justifying your playoff Lamar. No, I know you don't actually. You're not that.
I love Lamar. I hope he's in the Super Bowl this year.
Me too. Genuinely me too. But I me, I do think the playoff stuff is a little overblown. It's number 1.
It's tremendously small sample size.
His number 1 receiver was like Anquan Bolden. I think the first time. No, I don't think that's actually true, but he's had such terrible receiver play. And now Zay Flowers does look like he's probably out for that game. So you could make that argument that that's happening again here. But I don't think you have to worry about this one.
All right, let's go to the Sunday 1:00 game. The 7-seed Broncos travel to the 2-seed Bills. I'm going to guess the line for this game is double digits. Like Bills minus 10.5. Am I close?
Yeah, sorry, I lost it right here. 9.5. 9.5. Right, I knew it was right around that. I knew it was right around that number, but they're 9.5. Yeah. I got to tell you, I don't have much on this game. Like, I feel like the Bills probably win. Yeah. I don't know if it's closer than we think or a complete blowout. Like, I
think it's a complete blowout. So here's the thing that the Broncos play a ton of man coverage. This is what I referenced earlier. That's just going to be so hard to do against Josh Allen. How are you going to play man coverage and not have eyes on Josh Allen as a scrambler? The Broncos also have the 3rd highest rate of 3-and-outs offensively, and you just can't do that against the Bills. So the Broncos defense was really good early in the season. They gave up 27 points a game from week 13 to 17. Now, they shut out the Chiefs, but it was the Chiefs' backups. So I don't think this is going to be a good game. I think the Bills roll in this one.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair. My only bet in this game is Josh Allen touchdown, minus 125. Tush push Bills have started to get involved there. So I think there's some money there. I really don't have much of a read on this game outside of I think the Bills win it. I really wish it wasn't Denver. I wish it was Cincy. That'd be a lot more interesting.
Yeah.
Cameron Crawford said Steelers fans hoping for 5 Lamar turnovers so they can get 4 field goals off of them and win the game. Well, they got 1 Lamar turnover off of them last time they beat them, and it was ripped out of the hands of Justice Hill. It was insane. If you look at all of Lamar's picks this year, none of them have not hit a Ravens player in the hands first. It's pretty insane, but I'm a Lamar stan, and I think what's happened to him in this MVP debate is one of the greater injustices in MVP history. So I'm biased, and I'm on full Lamar me watch right now.
I was gonna go look up. Lamar Jackson only has 8 turnover-worthy plays this entire season.
Yeah,
that's insane.
And that's that again about them being the 7th best team in football of all time. It is more about Lamar than anything and how insane Lamar has been. And obviously Derrick Henry plays a factor in that as well, but I think Lamar plays a huge factor in how good Derrick Henry's been. So yeah, I can't, the fact that Josh Allen's going to win MVP disgusts me.
Let me drop some more turnover worthy play stats on you. Hold on. So let's see, how many quarterbacks are there? Among 40 quarterbacks with 200 dropbacks this season, Lamar Jackson has the lowest turnover-worthy play rate in the NFL at 1.4%.
Yeah, the Lamar thing, I really hope he's able to get a Super Bowl. Hopefully not this one for obvious reasons, but I really hope he's able to win a Super Bowl so people can actually respect and understand how incredible Lamar Jackson's career has been so far. I mean, he should be winning his 3rd MVP this year. He's not. I'm sure he'll win another one down the line. I just, I don't hate Mahomes the way that people hate Mahomes. I don't hate the Chiefs the way that people hate the Chiefs, but I would say that the one negative that Mahomes has provided to the NFL is we are never going to give the other top quarterbacks in the league proper flowers or credit or respect. And I had a buddy who was like, well, Tom Brady had that as well. Tom Brady had like a decade where he didn't win a ring. And I know we're still in Mahomes' 7th year, so obviously that could happen. Like next year, maybe we go 10 years where Mahomes doesn't win a ring. Even if you look at Brady's first 7 years, he missed the playoffs once and lost in the divisional round once and lost in the wild card round another time. Like the floor for the Chiefs is making the AFC Championship in overtime. So I just worry because I do think the Chiefs probably beat the Ravens in the AFC Championship. I just worry we go through Lamar's whole career and we just never properly as a whole respect him, because if he doesn't have a ring, it's going to go back to the dumbest conversations possible. And yeah, I hate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get into the rest of the Sunday slate, and we'll preview this one briefly. There'll be lots of more in-depth breakdowns this week, but 7-seed Packers at the 2-seed Eagles on Sunday at 4:30. I'm not going to guess. I know this one. It opened at 3.5. The Eagles are now favored by 5.5 because I saw that going around on Twitter, but this is a rematch of a 34-29 victory in Brazil in week 1. The season opener, also going to be the season ender for the Packers. They'll bookend their season with losses to the Eagles. The Eagles roster is loaded. They've struggled out of the gate. They failed to score in the first quarter 10 times in the regular season. It's obviously a concern when you go against a Packers team that can get hot at any time. But the Packers are coming into this game with, Jordan Love's going to play. It was an elbow contusion. They said he could have gone back into the game, but serious concerns. Christian Watson is likely done for the year. I haven't seen an announcement, but it seemed serious in the way it was being talked about. So that's a big hit for the Packers. They have the playoff experience. This Eagles team also has the playoff experience. I like the Eagles in this one.
This game scares me more than any game this season scared me from an Eagles perspective, or I should say the games we've had AJ and Lane out there. If the Eagles win this game, I think they're fully 100% going to the Super Bowl. I truly believe that. And I think that if they lose it, they won't. How about that for a hot take? But
there's some analysis.
Yeah, there you go.
If the Eagles lose this game, they will not win the Super Bowl.
But I really do think Green Bay is the scariest matchup out there for us. You could argue in Detroit, and you could argue that the matchup got less scary given the Christian Watson injury and Jordan Love being banged up. I do think Jordan Love has had 2 times where he's missed time due to injury this year, and he's come back. And the first game after that, he's looked pretty rough. Especially to start those games. So hopefully you get a little rust. Obviously he didn't miss time here. He only missed like a half, but you hope that there's some rust. You hope that he's a little banged up, obviously, if he's going to go out there and play, which it sounds like he is. But everyone's saying, like, everyone had the exact same reaction when the line got tweeted out. And Eagles -3.5, it should be a touchdown. How's it not -6? And I think it just goes to my point that I've made the entire year. Green Bay has been the most disrespected team I've ever remembered throughout an NFL season. People don't take them seriously at all. And I know it's because they've lost all their big games, but they won 12 games. Like they did go 12 or 11-6, actually, because they lost this week. They did go 11-6. And you look at their DVOA. DVOA loves them. They have them top 5 in offense. I don't know where they are on defense now. I haven't looked in a couple weeks, but and the comments that Eagles line went from 3.5 to 4.5. It's actually up to 5.5 now. But that's not an indication of what the odds makers think.
They are 4th in offensive DVOA and 5th in defensive DVOA.
Are they the only team in the NFL top 5 in both? Or are we in there?
I don't think we are. I'll check.
I think that goes a long way to say that the Packers are 4th and 5th on offense and defense in terms of DVOA. And people on Eagles Twitter are talking about it like we're playing, a normal 7 seed. We're not. We got incredibly unlucky. The NFC North was insane this year. And for that reason, that's why the Packers are 11-6. Not because they're not that good. It's because they were in the NFC North. It's because they had multiple stretches where they missed their quarterback, multiple stretches they were missing huge pieces. I think, Matt, it's hard for me to say, oh, well, don't worry about this game. You're only playing a top 10 quarterback and a top 5 head coach and a top 5 offense and a top 5 defense in terms of DVOA. The odds makers told you what they think about this game. They think it's one of the closest spreads of the week. They think the Eagles are only a 3.5-point favorite. Now people are going to look at 4.5, look at 5.5, look at where it gets to, and that's what they're going to think the line is. That's what we've bet it to.
Yeah.
Vegas makes adjustments to try to get equal play on both sides based on the amount of bets that they're getting right when their line opens.
There's actually a lot of teams that are top 10 in both. Baltimore.
Top 5, though?
No, that's it. So Baltimore is first on O, sixth on D. The Bills are second on O, eighth on D. Detroit third and seventh. Green Bay is fourth and fifth. Kansas City eighth and ninth. The Eagles are 12th and first. So the Eagles are just outside the top 10 on offense, but first on defense.
Yeah, Sheil Kapadia said on his podcast that Green Bay is the best 7 seed ever. He said no 7 seed has ever been top 5 in both offensive and defensive DVOA. Yeah, that's absolutely true. I'll go a step further. This is the best 7 seed in the history of sports. Give me the NBA. Give me the NHL. I don't care who's won. This team is a top 6 team in the NFL, in my opinion. And they're the 7 seed based on their own conference. It's insane. But is the line movement based upon what people believe about Hurts' status for the game? No. He practiced on Saturday. He's playing. So they opened 3.5 with people knowing Jalen was playing. All that this line movement is people betting on the Eagles. That's all it is. And you could use that as a positive. You could say, hey, the Sharps are pouring money in on the Eagles. I would look at it a little bit more negatively and say Joe Public out there in South Philly is hammering the Eagles to oblivion, and I think that's what's happening. But
yeah, I would rather be the 3 seed playing the Commanders. Honestly, I would rather play any team that's ranked below the Eagles. I'd rather play Commanders. I'd rather play Bucks. I'd rather play Rams. I'd rather play the Vikings than play the Packers in the first round. The only team that I would not like, if you gave me a choice, I would not pick Detroit over Green Bay, but I'd pick any other team as my matchup I would rather have in the first round. But I still think the Eagles will win this game. I'm not like scared of Green Bay. I know people are going to get like annoyed about that. Oh, the Eagles can beat anybody, and they can, but it's about matchups. And I do think it's a tougher matchup for the Eagles than you would expect to have as a 2 seed.
If you can't use if you're scared, get a dog line at me. I have a dog. She's right here. I am scared and she's here for me. But
she's not big enough to protect you, Mark. You need a bigger dog.
Oh, you don't know. She can get real mean here as she's sleeping on my lap. But no, I am scared. I'm genuinely scared. But do I think they have like a 60 to 65% chance to win the game? Yeah. That's probably what I'd say, like 60, 65. If you gave me Washington, I'd say it's like 85. Like, that's how confident I'd feel. Cameron commented, Sharps are the last one to make their bets. Not as soon as the line comes out. It's Joe Philly changing the line. A lot of small bets adding up. I generally agree with that. There are some syndicates out there that try to hit it right as it opens to try to get any value that they see out there. That's a rare thing, though. I do generally agree. Joe Check commented, how healthy is Hurts? Could that be the reason for the line? No, I think he's fully healthy. I think that stuff is overblown personally. Once he got back to practice, I stopped worrying about that. I don't think that's the reason for the line. I think the reason for the line is everything we just ran through. Green Bay's top 5 in offensive and defensive DVOA. Their only losses are to the Lions, Vikings, and Eagles this year. They've played the Eagles already. And by the way, I know we won the game. They kept it close. Like, it was a 5-point loss. They had the ball at the end of the game to try to go win the game.
For what it's worth, the Football Power Index gives the Packers a 49.7% chance to advance to the divisional round. So
that is scary.
Yeah. All right. Let's keep rolling along here. Let's go to Tampa, where the 3 seed Bucks will host the 6 seed Commanders. I'm going to guess this is a close spread, like 1.5, maybe a half a point. Is it a pick 'em? Bucks -1.5.
Bucks -3.
Okay. So this is the night game.
You're going to land there.
Yeah, this is the night game on Sunday. Tampa beat Washington back in week 1. 2 week 1 rematches in the first round of the playoffs on the NFC side. And Tampa won that game 37-10. Baker Mayfield has had a good season for Tampa. If you look at his stats, he's second in touchdown passes, third in completion percentage, and third in passing yards. They also have the 4th highest rushing yards per game in the league. But week 18 was rough for them in a must-win spot. There were struggles. The defense has struggled with health and consistency. It's hard to feel good about the Bucs offense going into this game. But you look at the Commanders, and they have the worst run defense of any playoff team. They were 30th overall this season, the worst in the playoffs. And so you got to think Bucky Irving will get going for Bucky Irving for the Bucks.
Yeah.
I like that.
You got it.
I like that.
And he's an Oregon Duck too.
Yeah,
Bucky
that just hit me. But anyways, they have done better in recent weeks, week 16 and 17, but they were facing the Eagles with a backup quarterback, and so they stacked the box against Saquon. And they were facing a rookie quarterback with Atlanta and Michael Penix Jr., so they could stack the box in both of those games. And so, will the Bucks be able to run the ball on them the way that other teams were this season? I will say, the X factor in this game is Jaden Daniels as a scrambler. That's huge. Todd Bowles versus Jaden Daniels is the matchup to watch in this game. And Bowles has done a great job of scheming things for quarterbacks. Bowles likes to bring pressure. And the problem with bringing pressures against a guy like Jaden Daniels is it's probably going to be a big play for you or a huge play for them if he's able to break contain. All of a sudden you slip a cornerback's tackle and you got 30 yards of open grass. So I don't know. I think I like the Commanders in this game. I think it's tough. I wouldn't put money on this game, but I think I lean slightly to the Commanders.
I'll tell you what, I'll be putting a lot of money on this game, but it's on weird stuff. I like a bunch of weird stuff in this game. I can't pick a side. I lean Tampa winning, but I think it's coming down to the wire either way. I really do think this is a shootout, like a 30-27 type game. So I'll start with, I like the over. 5 straight games for Tampa have hit the over. You just mentioned some defensive issues on both sides, especially on Washington's side. And you look at when they played earlier this year, obviously much different teams than when they opened the season in week 1. Yeah. Which is funny. That's another week 1 matchup. Eagles, Packers in week 1 and now Commies, Bucks as well. But 37-20, it was a high scoring affair there, 57 points. Obviously, Chris Godwin was out there for Tampa. But I do think it's going to be another 34-31, 30-27 type high scoring game. So give me the over. And then if we're breaking it down to a couple things to watch for, I think Jaden Daniels rushing in general is what you can watch for. I think I said it kind of, this is not cross sport, but cross level with Notre Dame. Part of the reason I was kind of confident Riley Leonard would run the ball. You're not saving up for anything anymore. You're not keeping him healthy for anything anymore. If you're Washington, you probably let it rip with Jaden Daniels running the ball in this game. And
they did that against the Falcons in week 17. Jaden Daniels carried the ball 16 times for 127 yards in week 17 in a must-win against the Falcons. That was his highest rushing. That was tied for the most carries of the season, and it was his high in rushing yards. And the other game that was next is week 1 against Tampa, 16 carries for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. So Jaden Daniels will run the ball a ton in this game.
Yeah, I mean, he's had 4 games over 81 yards. He's had 10 games over 44 yards. Like 6 or 7 over 50. It looks like his rushing prop weekly has been around like 47.5, 46.5. I think you can go and bet that every week as a weekly bet, the same way I do with Jalen Hurts touchdown, especially when it comes to these big games. Because if you look at the times that Jaden Daniels didn't do that, it's when he had banged up ribs in the middle of the season, and they were clearly doing a lot to protect him and to not have him run. I always think about that Eagles game. He only ran the ball 7 times for 18 yards in that game. And the week before that, 3 times for 5 yards. And the week before that, 8 times for 35 yards. You take those out, he's averaging like 70 to 75 yards per game on the ground. So something I'll be watching that has not dropped yet is the Jaden Daniels rushing prop. I'll definitely be betting the over there. Mike Evans touchdown, 6 of the last 10 times he scored a touchdown. Mike Evans is almost like a 50-50 bet, I think, in any game to score a touchdown. So to give me plus money on that against, I think, a Washington secondary that you can get, give me Mike Evans there. And then my one last thing, and I actually want you to look at the draft, our draft guide from last year for this one, Shane, because I don't think I was high enough on this guy, clearly. Jalen McMillan has really, really broken out for Tampa this year. I was curious where you and Dives had him in the offseason, went in the 3rd round. I imagine we probably had him around that 3rd, 4th round marker. But you look at what he's done as of late. The last 5 weeks, he scored a touchdown every single week, and he has 7 total touchdowns in that span. He's got 24 catches for about 250 yards in that 5-week stretch too, as well as the 7 touchdowns. So I'll be betting all things Jalen McMillan in this game. Give me Jalen McMillan catches. Give me Jalen McMillan yards. And then most importantly, Jalen McMillan touchdown is plus 220 right now. 5 straight games he scored in, 7 total touchdowns in that. Love Jalen McMillan as kind of a shot in the dark for all things when it comes to stats this week.
I had Jalen McMillan 76 overall. You had him 81st overall. He went 92nd overall.
Oh, okay, so we were both higher than when he went. Yeah, he looks a lot better than Jalen Polk does. I'll say that much. And they were obviously coming from Washington, different situations. But Jalen McMillan really, he had a catch yesterday. One of the better catches you'll see all season for a touchdown.
Yeah. Quick question here from the chat, and we'll get to the last game. Well, I guess it wasn't a question, but Cameron said he'd love to see the Bucs in the divisional round. Wants revenge. But then he also said if you want someone to knock off the Lions, the Commanders and Daniel's X Factor could help. Joe Ciccoletti's saying big Zach Ertz game as well. If the Eagles beat the Packers, do you want the Bucs to win and travel to Philly, or do you want the Commanders to win and then you get the winner of Vikings-Rams?
You get the winner of Vikings-Rams on a short week on Monday. I think that's 100% what I'd want. I don't care who it is either. I'd want the Rams. We're saying if I can pick my opponent, it's the Rams. We just handled them, and that wasn't like the Packers thing's a little different. The Rams was like a month or two before. By the way, breaking news: Christian Watson torn ACL.
Yeah, I was afraid of that.
So no Christian Watson, obviously, for this week. So that's huge for the Eagles. But Bucs would be the last team I'd want to see for the schedule reason. And just, I know you're saying I want the revenge. I want Hurts to exercise his demons. I kind of feel that way about the Super Bowl with Kansas City. If you're asking me Kansas City, Buffalo, or Baltimore, I kind of want Kansas City. So I get that point. But I
don't ever want to play Kansas City in a playoff game because officials will put a heavy finger on that game and it'll annoy the crap out of me.
You know me, I try to stay away from the.
I do too, but it's become impossible this year with some of the ways Eagles games have been officiated. But
there's more point about the Eagles to me getting boned than there is about the Chiefs getting helped even this year. You look at the stats about the Eagles penalty wise, it's insane. But yeah, I don't want Tampa. I would much rather the Rams, and even would rather the Vikings, especially how we looked at them last night. And then
I actually think the Eagles match up really well with the Bucs, but the rest differential thing is big for me. If the Vikings Rams was also a Sunday game, I think I would rather have the Bucs than the Vikings, but rather have the Rams than the Bucs. But since they would be coming off a day less rest, I'll definitely be. Well, I don't know. I say I'll definitely be pulling for the Commanders to win, so the Eagles get the Monday night winner. But I also would love to see the Commanders not win a playoff game. But from a perspective of like, it's win-win. I either get to make fun of Commanders fans that talked incessant trash after cheap shotting Jalen Hurts out of a game and then barely winning. So I either get to clap back on that, or we get to face a team off a rest differential. So I think the Bucs is the correct play to root for from an Eagles, or excuse me, the Commanders winning is the correct thing for the Eagles' best matchup.
They have one playoff win since the Bush-Gore election. They have one playoff win since 9/11. I mean, you can run down all the historical things. They have, I think it's been 14 years since their last playoff win or something like that too. So yeah, I think it's total win-win. If the Commanders, I tweeted all those at Commanders fans and they got upset with me. So I would say I'd be very happy to troll the Commanders, but I don't want to face Tampa. So I'll be unfortunately rooting for Washington.
Yeah. Okay, last game. I did not think we would top an hour on this show, but here we are. The number 5 seed Vikings at the number 4 seed Rams on Monday. I'm assuming the Vikings are favored in this one, like 2.5, 3.5.
The Vikings are favored by 2.5, depending where you're looking.
Nice. All right, so this is the Monday night game. The Rams have
down to 1.5. Actually, I apologize.
Oh,
down
wow.
to 1.5.
The Vikings did look real bad last night, but the Rams bounced back from a 1-4 start to the season. Their defense has been phenomenal down the stretch, but their offense has been not. They scored 44 points against the Bills in week 14. And then in weeks 15 through 17 combined, they only scored 44 points. Puka Nacua has a 40% target rate this season. That is the highest rate for a player with at least 200 routes run since at least 2007, which is as far back as that tracking data goes. So this offense runs through Puka. you look at the Vikings, and the only non-Lions loss the Vikings have had this season. So they've lost to the Lions twice. They lost one other game, and it was to the Rams back in week 7. The Rams beat them 30-20. Sam Darnold looked terrible last night. Like, I didn't tweet this, but I thought about it. Like, I was watching the game with a buddy of mine that's a Lions fan, and I was like, the Sam Darnold decision is going to be tough for the Vikings this offseason. And by the end of the game, I was like, well, the Sam Darnold decision's pretty easy now. Yeah. He looked terrible anytime he was blitzed last night. If he can't hold the ball for 3+ seconds, it's over. And so I would expect the Rams have a good unit getting pressure. I would expect them to dial up pressure on Darnold. But the Vikings defense has played at a really high level this year. And I know the Lions eventually got going last night, but the Vikings defense has been good. The Rams offense has struggled. And so I could see this being a kind of a slugfest of a low scoring game, if I'm being honest, between a Vikings offense with a very real Achilles heel and a Rams offense that's just struggled. So what do you think what do you expect to see in this one?
This is one that I feel like, even though I feel like I've struggled with a lot of the games of gambling. Like, I like the Chargers -2.5. I like the Ravens -9.5. I think the Bills win. I'm worried about the Packers, Eagles. I wouldn't bet it, but I think the Eagles win. Washington, Tampa, I had a million bets on it. I lean Tampa. This is the one I have no lean. Like, you could tell me anything, any outcome happens in this game. I think normally I would say Sean McVay has done such a good job. I actually think he's being undersold in the Coach of the Year conversations this year a little bit. But you look at the other sideline, and it is the Coach of the Year. It's Kevin O'Connell, and he's done just as good of a job as anybody. I'm going to go with the over here. I think there's a lot of points to be scored. Again, referencing a rematch, 30-23 or 30-20. That went well over the total of 47. The total is, again, 47 here. So I think I'm going to go with the over, even with how Darnold looked in that game. Something I'll ask you about the Vikings and Jefferson. And Justin Jefferson is one of one, maybe the most valuable non-quarterback in the sport. Is there any argument that the Eagles are a lot more equipped to handle Justin Jefferson than almost anybody else in football? With Quinion, with kind of the safety help that we have, and with how good the secondary's been?
Yes. Also, you have seen the Eagles attacked deep the last few weeks. So it would be a little bit of a scary matchup with Justin Jefferson, with Jordan Addison, with their penchant to hold the ball and throw it deep. Because I do think that's what you're going to see teams do to the Eagles in the playoffs, is try to test those corners deep outside the numbers. But I do think they are well equipped. It's just been a little shakier the last couple weeks.
Yeah, this is really tough. This is the toughest game of the week from that perspective. I'll go with the Rams. Maybe that's hopeful thinking. Maybe that's me wanting to play the Rams. So I'll be rooting for them. But I already said I think Tampa's winning anyway, so I think it's going to be Philly-Tampa. But who do you think has the best chance at giving Detroit a game out of – let's take Green Bay out of it, because I think if Green Bay beats the Eagles, I think they're going to beat Detroit. But Tampa, LA, Minnesota, or Washington, who has the best chance at giving Detroit a game? I don't think it's Minnesota.
It's not Minnesota, because Minnesota's had their shots and missed, and they got embarrassed last night. I don't love the Rams against them, but I can't say the Commanders because their run defense is so bad. Like, I want to say the Commanders because maybe Jaden Daniels just goes nuclear as a scrambler in that game. So I guess I would say the Rams, but I hate that answer. I honestly don't know that any of those three teams beat the Lions.
Yeah, I would say the Rams, who I think are the worst of those three teams. Yeah. and I think I'd say the Rams just because you saw how they matched against the Bills, and they got in that 44-41 type game.
If you get a good Stafford offensive game, they can put up a lot of points. And
this week too.
Yeah, and so, they've got a good defensive front. Maybe they can give them some issues in the run game and make Goff uncomfortable. So I guess I would say the Rams, but I don't love that answer.
I'm talking myself into the Rams. As we're talking here, an extra day, home game. I don't think Minnesota is going to take over the stadium in a way that I think a lot of fan bases would in LA. Give me the Rams. Give me McVay. I'll take the Rams. Stafford got a week off. Give me the Rams.
Yeah. All right. I'll take the Rams. Don't love it. Don't even like it, honestly.
No, I don't like it.
But all right. That's going to about do it. Mark, do you have any final thoughts that you want to fire off before we get out of here?
Play like a champion on Thursday in the Orange Bowl. Notre Dame, Penn State. Please. I don't care about the national championship. Ohio State's probably going to beat everyone by 40. Whoop-de-doo. Just get to the championship. Beat Penn State. I have to deal with these heathens, these Penn State cultists out there. Please don't do this to me, Notre Dame.
All right, that's going to do it. Thank you guys for joining us for episode 184 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHalfNFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr. And we will catch you guys next week to react to the wild card round and preview the divisional round. Till then, go Birds.